Yeah. I'm going to give it right till 7. All right. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Thursday, August 12th, 2021 Board of Education regular meeting for Lincoln Way Community High School District 210. Can you please call the roll? Yeah, we'll say the Pledge of Allegiance first. Now, can you please call the roll?
Mr. Janik.
I'm here.
Ms. Janice Doyle.
Here.
Mr. Kirking.
Here.
Mr. Lacine. Mr. Lucetti.
Here.
Mr. Kostick. Mrs. Stokes.
Here.
All right, thank you, Ms. Stone. I'll be serving as President Pro Tem in absence of President Kostick. We have several individuals signed up for public comment tonight. We have a 30-minute time allotment for public comment. We have about 15 people. Each individual is allowed 5 minutes. If the first 6 people or so do use the full 5 minutes, then we will not be able to get to the rest of the comments. So we'll try to work through as many as we can get to. And with that, I'll have Amanda Maletic.
Good evening. I would like to start by thanking each board member. I know this is a voluntary position that you are elected into, but it's time for you to do your job and stand up for our children. Number 1, the science does not support an emergency. I'm not going to read off the data from IDPH or local hospitals, but if you took 1 minute to do some research or make a phone call, you would see that the positive cases are no longer a valid tool of judgment. We will always have positive cases. This is a virus that will never go away. What you need to look at is ventilator usage and death counts with no underlying conditions. According to IDPH, our numbers are very low and are across the country. Moving on. Number 2, did anyone question why masking, testing, etc. is so important in Illinois? Pritzker has been touting that Illinois has the highest testing rate of any state. And he must love that since his private capital firm, which he co-founded with his brother Anthony in 1996, invested in Path Group and Q Health. He also owns stake in Mingle Health and Fierce Pharma. Never heard of them? Look them up. Pritzker has tried to hide behind the fact that he put his companies into a blind trust, but when paychecks roll in, and from that blind trust, I'm sure he's laughing in our faces while paying for his private jet to fly his family to Florida to enjoy a free-faced day. Shame on all of us for allowing it. Number 3, masking. You are trying to force a mask on our most vulnerable future leaders, beating them into submission by hiding their faces, never seeing a smile, not being able to read social cues from teachers, peers, and friends. Teen suicide rates are going through the roof, and that should scare you more than any mandate. As for mask effectiveness, not one single box, bag, or container says it stops viruses. Let me say that again. Not one single box, bag, or container says it stops viruses. We drove to every store in the area, we picked up every box, and we took pictures of them, and they all have the same warnings. Number 1, this mask has not been approved by the FDA and has not been cleared by the FDA. Number 2, this mask will not prevent the spread of viruses or aerosol spread infections, including, but not limited to, COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2. There are pictures in your packet. Let me remind you that this is not approved by the FDA, then it is experimental, and therefore we are protected by the Nuremberg Code that gives American citizens the right to refuse wearing one as an experimental thing. I have provided paperwork for all of you to look through regarding these masks, showing an actual report of an N95 mask, given there, being sold as a KN95 FFP2 mask, which is the highest rating for a mask available to us. It has a 52% effectiveness, at highest 64% against particulates, not aerosols. It is in all the paperwork provided, and that is from the CDC. I expect a response from this board regarding these findings within 14 days. Number 4, PCR tests are inaccurate and unreliable. They have been proven to show positive results for all SARS viruses, including influenza A, B, and the common cold. You can call your local IDPH, even our local hospital, to confirm this. If our tests are inaccurate, then we should not be using them. Even the FDA has removed their approval status and is given until December to remove them from use. In addition, quarantines require parental consent or court order. We have never quarantined a child for the flu, the cold, or any other virus. A school, school board, or ISB does not have the authority to place a quarantine on any child without written consent from me or a court order. That is state law. I know many of you are scared as a district of being sued, losing status and funding, etc. from the government. Well, let me tell you this. The liability for forced participation in a medical experiment, including possible injury, may be incalculable. Forcing a mask not approved is experimental and opens up each and every one of you to litigation in the future. You are not health professionals, you are not doctors, you are not nurses. You are elected volunteer professionals that are supposed to oversee the education of our children in reading, writing, arithmetic, etc. But hear me when I say the following. If my child gets a staph infection on her face or has an asthma attack that requires an ambulance ride and subsequent hospitalization, or any other illness or infection, including mental illness from wearing a mask while in your schools, you better believe I will find an attorney willing to set a precedent and go after every single school board member, staff member, teacher, and nurse that allowed that occur to my child due to your enforcement of an experimental mask during her time in your learning institutions. I do not co-parent with the government. Thank you.
All right. Next up is Brian Kramer.
Hello. To start, COVID is not going away. It will be here permanently. Are we supposed to just keep wearing masks for a virus with a very high survival rate? We don't wear masks for the flu and common cold, which, by the way, the flu has a higher mortality rate in children. I am not a doctor or scientist, but I have a basic understanding of biology. A virus's main goal is to survive, just like every biological organism. By killing its host, the virus dies with it. Hence why such a very high survival rate. Also, yes, the variant is more contagious, but it actually has a way higher survival rate than its former, kind of like a cold. Also, notice how China, where this virus originated, they are not wearing masks and don't seem to have any more outbreaks. Why trust Fauci, who has flip-flopped on almost everything, and these hypocritical politicians who don't wear masks when they go out? Lastly, the CDC, who you all think we should follow, is not requiring its employees to wear a mask or be vaccinated. Just some food for thought.
Next up is Ruby Johnson.
You may be wondering why I'm carrying a jar of marbles tonight. Did you know that as parents, we get 936 weeks with our children from the time they're born until they turn 18? And they spend, on average, 144 of those weeks in high school. 144 marbles in this jar represent the weeks that our children spend in this building. The 144 weeks that we have donated to you. 144 weeks that you get with our precious children to shape them and educate them and protect their well-being. Every single student who walks through the front door of all Lincoln Way high schools is handing you 144 marbles to protect and shepherd and handle with the utmost care. And with all due respect, you've let those marbles roll across the floor and you're all tripping on them. In the Bible, 2 Timothy says, God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of sound mind. Whether you're a believer or not, every day, our students put their hands over their hearts and pledge allegiance to one nation under God, which is allegedly indivisible, which we protect liberty and justice for all. What has happened to our sound mind, to our power, to our liberty? To one country as opposed to 50 states acting as individual entities? Do you think that the freedoms we enjoy right now were just given to us? Of course not. They were fought for by people who cared deeply about our future. We've allowed one man who's drunk on power, worshiping flawed science and propagating fear to decide what is best for our children. I know you are up against a Goliath when it comes to the governor's mandates and the bullying and threats by IDPH and ISB. It would surely be much easier for you to play it safe, to roll over and play dead, but at what cost? I guess the real question is, do you think the fight is worth it? Do you think our kids are worth it? As you probably know, hundreds of us gathered in front of this school 2 nights ago to express our desire to have the choice when it comes to masking our kids. As a parent of 2 current Lincoln Way Central students, I received an email yesterday from Superintendent Tingley noting that masking versus unmasking is a very emotional topic for some, and claiming that the continued debate has become a distraction from the goal of getting our kids back to school. It's just a mask, right? It's just 2 weeks to flatten the curve. It's just to protect others. It's just so we don't overwhelm the hospitals. It's just a shot. It's just a piece of paper. It's just a slippery slope. That's what it is. We all know we are up against a very contagious virus, one that anyone over the age of 12 can be vaccinated against, though the effectiveness of that vaccine is up for debate. We were told that it was never about eliminating the virus, but about making sure we didn't overwhelm the healthcare system. 17 months later, why are we still masked and being spoon-fed fear? What's the end game here? Our kids and all of us have spent the summer gathering indoors and out at festivals and concerts, eating in restaurants, traveling the country. The masks are pure theater at this point. Yeah, anyone can get the virus, but we know that the risk of serious illness or death for children is very low. To date, there hasn't been one single comprehensive study done in the US to show that children should be wearing masks in school. So what data are we using? Questioning what in the world is actually going on doesn't make you anti-vaccine or anti-mask or a conspiracy theorist. It makes you a critical thinker. It makes you someone who values personal choice. If we continue to let one person make the decisions for our entire state, we should be very worried about what the future looks like for ourselves, for our kids, and for our grandkids. You all were elected by the people, for the people, and we are the people. If you're not willing to do your job, I'd be happy to take one of those seats, and I'm sure many of the other parents here tonight would too. We elected you because we believed in you. We thought you were up for the job, and every job comes with challenges. We've all heard that these are unprecedented times. It's time you make some unprecedented moves. Guard these marbles with which you've been entrusted. Give parents a choice. Fight like hell to preserve the freedoms of your families. Pursue legal action and push back against the governor. I could have spent 5 minutes spouting off statistics and studies, but you're just as capable of accessing that information as I am. So I stand before you tonight as a resident, as a parent, and as an advocate for every child in this district who needs a voice. 39 other school districts to date in the state have decided to make masking a parent's choice, even in the face of the governor's mandates. And ISB's threats to pull accreditation and the ability to participate in sports, I'm asking you to care more about our kids than about the almighty dollar. Do you really think if every school stood up to this ridiculous leadership, they'd all lose funding? Whether or not you realize it, or even if you don't want to be—
Ma'am, please conclude your comments.
You're a role model for all who are watching. Other school districts are watching and waiting for your example. This shouldn't be a position you take lightly. It's time you push back. There's power in numbers. I'll be honest, if I think about it too hard, it's easy to become discouraged and think, what's the point? Nothing's ever going to change. But I came to the conclusion that even if you sit back and do nothing, my kids will know that I cared enough to fight for them. Our kids know that we care, Now it's time they see that you care. Thank you.
I'll speak quickly so I can respect everyone else's time as best I can.
Excuse me, are you Michael?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
I got it down to 5 minutes. I practiced a couple times. I have been a firefighter paramedic for the last 29 years. I've been part of the hazmat team and been involved in EMS training, including as an infection control officer. We are trained in proper selection of PPE depending on the setting and application, as all first responders and EMS workers are. I am by nature an advocate for safety. There are many extremely qualified and intelligent people that work at the CDC and IDPH. Unfortunately for our country, and especially for this state, they are not speaking with one voice. This has created illogical hypocrisy. For example, it is just not possible for the virus to be treated differently as we cross a state line. The most improperly used term in the last 18 months is follow the science. Regarding cloth and surgical masks, Amanda passed out that the warning label. The reason that warning label is there should sound very familiar to the Board of Education and Superintendent Tingley. That term is liability, the very same term that is misused to convince or even scare the Board of Education into complying with state COVID restrictions that have no legal backing, including this mask mandate. Executive orders have no lawful enforcement mechanism. It just doesn't exist, and your legal counsel that we pay for should tell you that. Sending emails to parents stating that the state will defund the district and the insurance carrier will no longer cover you is simply not true. There is no law that backs this mandate because there is no data to support universal masking. Many Illinois school districts, as earlier stated, have already voted to mask optional after the governor's unenforceable mask mandate. Only the state legislature can pass a law to mandate masks. They tried it and failed. Look it up. House Bill 2789 failed miserably. There is no law. It's not enforceable. The warning label is there because extensive studies need to be done to determine effectiveness percentages of cloth masks. Only when they do that would they have informed consent be established. Without informed consent, cloth and surgical masks are considered experimental PPE. So to the 210 board and to the 210 legal counsel, there is also liability attached to forcing our kids to wear experimental PPE. Hiding behind the state won't be good enough. Consider yourself informed. Some side effects are dizziness, headaches, lightheadedness, syncope, as well as bacteria trapped in a mask. Subsequent to this is increased depression, anxiety, and suicides, which we know the suicide rate has increased 9 times since the pandemic started, as well as substance abuse overdoses have increased as well. Let's get back to the illogical hypocrisy. Dr. Michael Osterholm, top White House COVID advisor, just said last week on mainstream media, August 3rd, 2021, cloth and surgical masks do not work. He's been an infection disease expert for 45 years. In his June 2020 podcast, he carefully explains why they don't work and explains why creating a false sense of security by allowing people to think they can ignore distancing because they are protected by a mask that does nothing. Robert Redfield, the current head of the CDC, also said just this week, I have not seen any data to support universal masking in schools. We called the CDC and they said the same thing. Again, our experts do not speak in one voice. COVID is spread by aerosolized respiratory droplets, breathing, talking, coughing, and sneezing. These droplets are not stopped from coming in or out of surgical masks. They simply go around and through the mask. Interestingly, a student sitting quietly working in class with no mask on is creating almost zero aerosolization. But a student with a mask on in class that has to ask or answer a question has to speak louder to be heard over the muffle or oftentimes repeat themselves, so the response can be heard. When the student speaks louder, they create more aerosolization and they expel it further than if they would simply speak with a normal tone without a mask. Yet we continue to say, follow the science. What we are doing is being completely illogical and hypocritical. I propose a solution that we keep your liability intact at the same time. Please instruct your teachers to teach and not become the enforcement arm of this unenforceable, illogical mandate. Simply let our kids learn and breathe. We are simply sending our kids to school without a mask. Any parent that wants to send their kids with a mask, that's their choice. If we comply with this illogical mandate, they will continue to move the goalpost as they have the entire pandemic and continue to create more restrictions. Last year it was we need masks till we get a vaccine. Now we need a vaccine so we can travel, go to concerts, and not wear a mask. Again and again they move the goalpost. Wake up. I will make the healthcare decisions for my kids, not the school board or the governor. Thank you.
And just so we have it clear for the record, that was Michael, is it Gralla? Yes. Okay, thank you. Next up is Hillary Kurzawa.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hillary Kurzawa, and I come here today as a concerned mother, community member, and graduate of Lincoln Way 2004 from this very school. When I look around this room and I look around our community, I see a community divided by this virus, the mask, the mandates, and the words of our elected politicians. Each and every one of us has done our own research, legit research, from the CDC, from everywhere, from actual teachers or MDs themselves. And all we are trying to do is do what is best for our families. I can stand here and repeat the distrust in masks and the vaccine, that you can still get COVID-19 when you are vaccinated and wearing a mask. I can state statistics, or I can even read from the back of the box, which Amanda did and provided for you, that masks do not prevent COVID-19 and most viruses that are the respiratory form. But I won't insult anyone's intelligence by repeating what has already been stated. Instead, I am here to plead with you for something that I never thought I would have to fight for. I ask you as a board to protect our medical choice and our rights that are protected under the United States Constitution, especially number 14. When will we stand up and unite for our local control? The CDC gave localities, especially school boards, the power to make their own back-to-school plans. How can we blindly hand over our authority to J.B. Pritzker only because he didn't disagree with what our community as a whole decided? I ask everyone in this room, who knows what is best for your child? It's not any of you. It is the parents. It is me. It is everyone sitting here in this room who protects their child daily, who pays their bills, who houses them, who feeds them. We know what is best for our children. I refuse to co-parent with a board and the government. Right now, it is only a mask, but what happens when they decide that we need a mandatory vaccination? It's only a mask. But can you see or even comprehend how this could set precedent for the future? Have you all read the proposed bill that has been tabled? The Senate Bill 3668, which removes medical and religious exemptions. This is what's on the table here, and this is what they are planning. That should scare everybody. Mandated vaccinations, forced testing, which is already being discussed, but it needs parent consent, and that was told to us by a superintendent who jumped in at another board meeting when they were talking about mass vaccination or mass testing in our schools. Mass testing, I apologize, I'm talking about mass testing. They want to test every student in the morning. They want to test them. Is that legal? Is that right? Or maybe they could just shut us all down again. They could put us all into quarantine, and more people can lose their livelihood and their businesses and their homes. But hey, it's only a mask mandate. Enough is enough. With all due respect, if the board is more concerned with losing accreditation and money than the equality and blatant discrimination of our children, that it might be time we elect stronger board members that will respect and defend our children, that will uphold the Constitution and the rights and liberties that are given to us. We all deserve the pursuit of happiness and to be confident that our children are being taken care of. That is all I'm asking. We are only asking for a choice, not for every student to not wear a mask. We just want choice. Thank you very much.
Next up, we have Aaliyah Murray. A-L-A-I Murray? A-L-A-I? Yes, sorry.
I'll speak quickly. Thank you for permitting me to speak this evening. My name is Alan Murray. My wife Susan and I have invested 50 years of our lives in the Linkaway school system. We are here tonight to help preserve for our grandchildren and great-grandchildren what we moved here for in the first place. Our 5 sons all graduated from Lincoln Way Central, went on to become successful members of our society. 3 of them were academic All-Americans. 3 of them received scholarships to major colleges. Our oldest son, Alan, received an appointment to the Air Force Academy and played football as a walk-on. Richard is an executive at Ford Motor and college All-American wrestler. Eric, our youngest, has a master's in special education and teaches special needs at Lamont High School. He recently became the head wrestling coach with a team state championship under his belt. The reason I mention these accomplishments is because we need to continue and expect these high standards in our schools. 20 years ago, the United States was #1 in the world in education. Today, we are 25th. That's not acceptable. The Lincoln Way student proficiency reading is 59%, and for math, it's 56%. That's not acceptable. We need to do better, and the way we are going to do that is to get involved and not be complacent like we've been in the past. You saw what happened when we weren't paying attention. Through questionable management, Lincoln Way almost became bankrupt. If we had been more vigilant then, maybe we wouldn't be here now. The question I'd like to ask the board tonight is, what are you doing to bring these proficiency scores up, and how can we follow your progress? Thank you.
Next up, we have Colin Woltman.
Hello, Lincoln Way District 210 School Board. My name is Colin Woltman. I'm a 15-year-old sophomore at Lincoln Way West High School. I'm here to urge you, do not institute another mask mandate or any other coronavirus restrictions in any school for the 2021-2022 school year, nor any year following. No student, no faculty should be forced to cover their face against their will, regardless of vaccination status or any other measure that will be used to discriminate in the enforcement of such a rule. There are many logical reasons why a mask mandate should not be established. To begin, why were mask rules and social distancing guidelines only enforced to prevent the spread of coronavirus? The measures enforced last year were not enforced in any year prior to prevent the spread of other viral infections, such as the flu, even though the influenza mortality rate is quite similar to that of COVID in children and teens. The measures introduced into schools last year did not make sense in the years before, nor do they make sense now. Furthermore, with vaccines widely available and COVID-19 being less severe to younger individuals, the risk that must be present to make immoral restrictions seem even somewhat reasonable is no longer there. Most importantly, even if mandatory mask wearing and social distancing policies were enforced again, they would do nothing. When mask rules and other coronavirus prevention guidelines were implemented last school year, masks were widely mishandled, with students and faculty constantly touching and adjusting their masks, and said masks likely being excessively reused and inadequately washed. Sir, with the gray hair in the middle on the right side, you are one such example. When I walked in this room, I saw you wearing your mask on your chin. So don't tell me it doesn't happen. I saw it today. And the school board should hold itself to the same standard that it holds the people in their schools. The school board should hold themselves to the same standard that they hold the students to in their schools. Additionally, once individuals leave the school building, the guidelines are ignored completely. People interact maskless outside of school, attending music festivals, eating out, simply hanging out with friends. As soon as the school is vacated, the precautions become meaningless. However, the arguments against further implementations are not limited to just logic, but morality as well. Mandating mask wearing and quarantining by force has no place in a free society. If you were to enforce these mandates, you, the school board, would go against the principles taught in your very own school curriculum. We students are told that we live in a free country, that we are all individuals with rights. Yet enforcement of these mandates makes this country less free. It strips away our individuality. Let us decide for ourselves whether or not we should mask up and get vaccinated. It is the decision of ourselves and our families, not of the school board nor bureaucrats sitting in secluded offices. As a student at your high schools, my experiences of masks were not enjoyable, and that feeling is shared by many other students. Not being able to see my associates, my acquaintances, whatever you would call them, their faces, that was not enjoyable at all. Not being able to see half my class, that wasn't good either. And my class, most of the students in my class would agree with that. Follow the principles that you teach us in school, and follow the will of your constituents instead of enforcing rules put together by a twisted, complex circle of politicians and so-called one-sided experts who do not represent and have never been a part of this community. It is clear that the people you represent do not support the guidelines you are putting in place for the next school year, so obviously you are instituting them in order to protect your state funding. To put this clearly, you are prioritizing money over the people you are supposed to represent. This greed will not be supported. This greed will not be supported, and if you enforce masking, quarantining, or any such restrictions this school year, you should enjoy your time on the school board while you have it, because you will be voted out very quickly.
So we've run up against the 30-minute time allotted for public comment. We still do have a few folks that had signed up to speak. I'm willing to stay after and talk to those individuals if they want. But we are going to move on to the next item on the agenda, which at this point I'd like to open the public hearing for the utilization of e-learning days in lieu of emergency days.
Good evening. This hearing today is to discuss the approval of the use of emergency learning days in lieu of weather-related emergency days. E-learning days are an opportunity for our students to learn from home on days when school otherwise would have been canceled due to inclement weather or other emergencies. E-learning days will be an option for the school district to utilize in addition to calling for a late start depending on the weather conditions or other factors. On e-learning days, students use their home computer, their mobile device, to log into Skyward and or Microsoft Teams to access assignments for the day and to submit their attendance. Students would be required to check in for attendance and then complete assignments as a continuation of what they are learning in class. If an emergency e-learning day is necessary, it is considered a regular school attendance day, and it does not need to be made up at the end of the school year. This past year, both staff and students were able to experience what e-learning would look like. Adjustments made throughout the school year allowed teachers a means to meet virtually with our students via Microsoft Teams and WebEx. As we enter the 21-22 school year, we continue to look for ways to enhance this method of instruction. Teachers have been provided with opportunities to learn how to use these tools necessary to accomplish a virtual learning environment, and refresher training sessions will be conducted during the first semester. On an e-learning day, all classes will meet virtually, beginning with 0 hour at 8 a.m. Students will attend class for 35 minutes, attend a teacher's office hours if necessary, and will have at least 45 minutes of asynchronous assignments to ensure students are receiving the full 5 clock hours of instruction. The complete schedule is available on our website, and a reminder will be sent if an e-learning day is utilized. If a student is unable to access the internet at home or alternate location due to an outage, parents will call to report that their student is unable to access and cannot check in on Skyward. Students will be expected to complete the e-learning assignments upon their return to school. Every effort will be made to inform staff, parents, and students the night before, but at times this may not be possible. A decision will be made by 5 a.m. at the very latest. Communication will be sent through email, phone calls, social media, and our website. Before this hearing, we needed to fill a few requirements in order to bring this proposal to the Regional Office of Education for final approval. We posted in our media outlets in July. We've sent emails to our parents in August, notice to our collective bargaining agreements in August, and today we're having our hearing and hopefully approval from our school board. While this is not necessary, this plan is also posted on our district website. Later in this meeting, we'll be asking for approval of a resolution to adopt e-learning days in lieu of emergency days. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Murphy. We have no public comments. Are there any comments from the Board of Education? Later, okay. All right, so at this time, I'd like to close the public hearing regarding the utilization of e-learning days in lieu of emergency days. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, I'd like to open the public hearing for the American Rescue Plan Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief.
Good evening. The Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief, or ESSER 3, is authorized under the American Rescue Plan Act. ESSER 3 funds have been allocated to school districts with the purpose of helping them safely reopen, sustain safe operation of in-person learning, and address the impact that COVID-19 has had on students. The $1.5 million that was allocated to Lincoln Way District 210 can be used from March 13, 2020 through September 30, 2023. No less than 20% of that $1.5 million is to be used to address learning loss. Each district that has been allocated ESSER 3 funds is to post their use of funds plan on the district website and seek public comment on the plan. Lincoln Way District 210 plans to use the ESSER 3 funds for a variety of purposes. First, we plan to partner with College Board to provide students with PSAT tests in order to measure learning loss and learning growth over the next 3 years. Next, we plan to update our online learning platform from Acellus to Edgenuity to address the needs of our at-risk and medically fragile students. We also plan to use the funds to address the social-emotional needs of our students with the use of Panorama in 21-22 and then shift to School Links in 22-23. Both platforms provide surveys, actionable data, and curriculum to address the social-emotional needs of our students. Additionally, we plan to provide both summer school and before and after school programs to address both the academic and social-emotional needs of our students as well. Finally, the remaining funds will be used for indoor air quality improvements in each of our buildings. Thank you.
All right, we have no public comments for the American Rescue Plan Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief. At this time, I'd like to close the public hearing on this topic. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, under presentations, we have the assessment update.
Good evening. Tonight, I'll be sharing with you information and data as it pertains to the SAT given in April of 2021 and AP exams that were given in May of 2021. Before we dig into the data, I'd like to provide a brief summary of some impactful student numbers. When we ended the 2021 school year, our enrollment was right about 6,600 students, with a pretty consistent enrollment amongst each of the 4 grade levels. The enrollment at Central and West was right about 2,000, and the enrollment at East was about 2,600. District-wide, we were at 8% low income, 13% special ed, and 1% English learners. We're all aware that the 2021 school year was unlike any other we have ever experienced. Students and families were able to choose their method of learning, whether it was remote or in person. As you can see, approximately 22% of our student body chose to learn remotely at some point during the school year. As a district, we spent 47 days in remote learning where all students were engaged via Microsoft Teams or WebEx. The remaining student attendance days were spent in blended A/B learning. I feel it's important to keep these in mind as we dig deeper into the data. The class of 2022 results on the SAT are highlighted on the screen. As you can see, our district average was a 1067. Approximately 80 points higher than the state average. When we look to compare our results with the state, we look at the performance from the fall PSAT to the spring SAT and recognize that all three of our high schools continue to grow while the state average saw a significant drop. With all the uniqueness of the school year, our students overall continue to excel in their performance. Looking at a comparison from graduating classes, our students are showing approximately the same amount of growth from assessment to assessment year after year. Students from the class of 2021 showed a 44-point growth over an entire year, while the class of 2022 showed a growth of 39 points after 6 months from the fall to the spring. This year, we'll share a deeper analysis of the SAT results with our department leaders. As an example, this chart shows the results broken down by course and then by section. We will use the data to help identify areas in which we can continue to improve our practices to help all of our students reach the benchmarks set forth by College Board and the Illinois State Board of Education. The ultimate goal is to understand what is happening in each course and section to be able to determine what may need to be addressed to help our students succeed. These past 2 years, we've only been able to test our students on the NMSQT and the SAT, thus creating gaps in our data. To help address these gaps, we'll be providing the following opportunities for students during the 21-22 school year. On September 21st, our freshman class will take the PSAT 9. On October 13th, our sophomores will take the PSAT along with our juniors who will be taking the NMSQT. For each of these classes, the last assessment was during the fall of their 8th grade year, in which they took the PSAT 8 for placement purposes. These opportunities will allow our students to become familiar with the SAT and will also provide us with data to better prepare our students to meet the benchmarks set forth by the state of Illinois. These will be followed up in the spring with all 3 grade levels participating in the state-mandated assessments, the PSAT 9, 10, and SAT on April 13th and 14th. From the SAT, we move on to AP. AP testing for the 2021 school year was once again different than normal. Students were given an option to take pen and paper or a digital version of the AP test. The vast majority of our students participated in the traditional pen and paper version of this assessment. The overall picture shows us giving approximately 3,700 exams, which is down from prior years. However, the percentage of students who took an exam and earned a 3 or better remains the same at about 60%. According to College Board representatives I spoke with earlier this week, they're most impressed with our student participation in our human geography and statistics. They are among the highest in the state of Illinois. As we look to celebrate the success of our students with the AP results, the chart shows the percentage of students who have earned AP credit during this past year for our freshmen, sophomores, and juniors. For our seniors, the percentage represents the percent of the student body who had earned some type of AP credit by the time that they graduated from Lincoln Way. You can see that it is still pretty consistent year after year. As a district, our students continue to excel on AP exams. This year we had 307 students earn status of an AP Scholar, earning a 3 or better on a minimum of 3 AP exams. 90 additional students earned AP Scholar with honors, passing 4 or more exams and maintaining a 3.25 average. We had an additional 193 students earning AP Scholar with distinction, which is passing 5 or more exams and maintaining a 3.5 average over all exams. Overall, 606 students were recognized as an AP Scholar. In years past, we would also recognize a National AP Scholar. This, unfortunately, is no longer being recognized by College Board. However, these are the students who continue to excel on AP exams. The numbers next to their name represent the number of exams taken during their years at Lincoln Way in which they've earned a 4 or a 5. All are from the class of 2021, except for one, Mahir Swami, who will graduate this school year. We are proud of all the accomplishments of our students, and we thank our teachers for their support in helping our students to be successful on both SAT and AP exams. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Murphy. Any questions? Any comments? All right, thank you. Next up on the presentation is the fiscal year 2022 tentative budget, second draft. Dr. Murphy, you can just go ahead and present that too.
I'd like to welcome real quick Mr. Dubak to the table. Mike started as our CSBO on July 1, so this is his first official meeting and presentation. Good luck, Mike.
Thank you much, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity tonight. I am pleased to present the second draft of this year's tentative budget here tonight, and we have two primary goals with this presentation. First is to highlight changes that have taken place since Mr. Kaufman presented the first draft in June. And then second is to finalize this budget for public inspection before the board formally adopts its budget in September. So please let me know if you have any questions during or after this overview here tonight. The district's audit of fiscal year 21 financials is currently underway. So for tonight's presentation, please note that any budget comparisons are based on unaudited actuals. Budgeted revenues and expenses have both increased notably over actual revenues and expenses during FY21. At the same time, this budget still mirrors previous financial forecasts. And so to say that in different words, the anomaly is FY21 actuals due to the pandemic rather than this budget. Currently, the FY22 budgeted surplus is $6.7 million across all funds. As the board is already aware, and for everyone in the audience, the operating surplus is what provides the truest picture of day-to-day financial health. So this year's budget complies with the board's fund balance policy 420 and includes a $2.9 million surplus, which is 3% of last year's operating expenses. One of the most important pieces about the budget process is the timeline. A public hearing date does need to be set here in September before the board can formally adopt the budget. And additionally, we must make that budget publicly available for inspection for at least 30 days leading up to the date of that hearing, as you know. So tonight I recommend holding that hearing as part of the regular board meeting on September 16th. And this will allow the board to then later adopt the budget via resolution after that public hearing concludes. Just in terms of budget for the development steps, through the spring of 21, we've looked at several data points, and I know Mr. Kaufman was very thorough with our team here, and that included staffing needs, enrollment projections, prioritizing building level projects, and district capital improvements, and more. Additionally, we have now, since I've come on board, we have reviewed year-end data after the close of the fiscal year, and that has allowed us to make some further refinements. And those updates are outlined in the slides ahead. Budgeted revenues are noticeably higher than actual revenues received last year. And I want to point out that's due in large part to a delay in property tax receipts, and that will be described in more detail shortly. Summary revenues for operating funds show a very similar picture, but obviously these exclude any tax levy revenues allocated for bond repayment, as debt service is not an operating fund. Just a brief moment on the delay in property tax receipts. We typically receive just over 50% of our calendar year tax revenue each spring before the close of the previous fiscal year. However, due to changes in tax deadlines this year, we did not receive those revenues as anticipated prior to June 30th. Those receipts are now expected in fiscal year 22. And specifically, from those, $2.6 million has been budgeted into a debt service budget transfer if necessary. to control an increase in the annual debt tax burden, as I know that's been a conversation for the board in the past. As you know, revenues come from local, state, and federal sources, and each community's breakdown of those sources is different. Overwhelmingly here in District 10, it comes from our local taxpayers. And anecdotally, I do live in the district, and I am one of those taxpayers. And so I pulled out my most recent tax bill. I can tell you 25% of my tax bill comes to District 210, excuse me. So I'm proud to live here. I'm happy to pay that bill, but at the same time, it also underscores how important it is for us to be good stewards of taxpayer money. As you can see on this slide, the largest change in projected revenue for FY22 is from local sources, and that again is due to the delays in property tax receipts. I'll take a few minutes here on this slide. Mr. Kaufman presented the first draft of the FY22 budget this past June. After the close of the year, we've made some important adjustments to revenues. Besides the local tax receipts, we have shifted to a more conservative stance on investment income at this time for our projections. The federal funds rate remains very low and short-term investment options are limited at this time, so we've moved more conservatively on that revenue budget. You can also see an adjustment to the federal revenue line toward the bottom of this list. As you heard earlier, we've received $1.5 million of federal grant funding through the ESSER fund. We did think initially at the time of the first draft of this budget that we would need to spend that money more quickly, that the timeline for that grant would be that we need to spend it immediately. Grant recipients have been given that flexibility over 3 fiscal years, and so we've made those adjustments to reflect that revised timeline, as you heard Dr. Fury mention earlier. I'll highlight just 2 more lines. Projected revenues from the other local line have been lowered slightly. These revenues are payments received from elementary feeder districts for transportation services, and we feel this budget change best reflects our projections for those reimbursements. And then finally, you'll see that $2 million set aside has been added for the potential debt service transfer. That debt transfer may or may not need to occur. This fall, we will soon initiate work with Mr. Bob Lewis from PMA Securities regarding debt refinancing. Because the district's bond rating has improved so drastically and so quickly, coupled with continuing low interest rates, the options available to us for a potential restructuring of debt may or may not dictate the need for us to transfer this money. In other words, I know the board has expressed an interest in controlling how quickly the annual debt burden can increase each year. And to honor that, what we want to do is take a look at refinancing some of the bonds. If options present the ability to control that growth through that mechanism, that's great. However, if the market changes or if such an option is not available, we have budgeted this transfer just in case. For expenditures, budget to actual comparisons have increased again more notably for FY21 than in past years. This is largely due to lower than expected expenses during 2021, and that is due to the COVID pandemic. Yes, some costs did increase during the pandemic. Cleaning supplies, plexiglass, other things that had to do with mitigation strategies during the pandemic, but many costs were far lower than initially budgeted. That includes fewer stipended activities, lower overtime, no building improvements, food supplies, fuel for transportation. Obviously, lunches and buses operated very differently last year than in a normal school year. And fortunately, we were also able to avoid the need to spend any of the contingency money that had been budgeted last year. Projections for the operating funds look similar regarding percentage growth. Obviously, salaries are operating expenses and far and away our biggest expense in this district, and so these look similar. Salaries and benefits specifically represent just over half of our expenditures when considering all funds, and when you remove debt service, and that's that bond That green part of the graph up there, salaries and benefits represent nearly 75% of our operating expenses. And this graph just shows, similar to revenues, those budgeted expenses have increased again. Salaries you'll see the most, and that is because we are assuming normal operations where we will run our activities and we return to normal in terms of staffing and salary expenses in that way. The most significant change from draft 1 to draft 2 in the area of expenditures is the inclusion of that budgeted transfer from education to debt service. Again, that may or may not need to occur based on the refinancing options evaluated this fall, but I want to highlight that that is budgeted. For other sources and fund balances, as I said earlier, the projected surplus for FY22 is $6.7 million. And that is the surplus for all funds. Because of the budget transfer, the operating surplus is anticipated to be closer to $2.9 million. And again, this operating surplus does represent 3% of the total operating expenses for FY21. And so that will ensure that we can meet our daily cash flow needs, and we should avoid any additional tax anticipation warrants this year. Based on this budget, the fiscal year 22 would close at roughly 30% operating fund balance. So that concludes tonight's overview of the tentative budget. I do want to take one moment and thank Mr. Kaufman for his time and effort in getting me up to speed on the district's finances, so thank you, Brad. And at this time, I'll turn it back over to Dr. Tingley and Mr. Janik. I'd be happy to take any questions you may have.
All right, thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? I just had one. For the delayed taxes, do we anticipate the collection rate will probably be the same? Have we heard anything from the county on how that's going to look?
We did just receive about $5 million, and so we had projected in this part of the fiscal year to get closer to 2, so that's some of that carryover and delay. We are anticipating, again, budgeting in terms of cash flow purposes, more of a return to normal, but that is yet to be seen if those deadlines change again.
And then real quick, the ESSER funding, which we thought we'd have to spend within a year or so, and it's spread out over 3 years roughly now?
Yes.
Is that a change?
That's the way we've handled it, yeah.
Okay. Was that something that changed, or just the way that we've decided to move forward on that?
That is, first of all, both the amount changed and the timeline changed. And so what that allowed us to do is some of what we were budgeting for devices, we now have different constraints put in the grant, as Dr. Fury mentioned, and we're spreading it out differently, so we're using those funds for some different purposes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain that a little bit further? I saw that you decreased the technology by 800,000, but also we had the, when we go over last year, we had the student devices that we approved and the teacher devices come out of the 2021 budget. Can you just go over kind of how that all flows through onto this budget? And also, since we increased the, we had on the budget 1.8 in technology. I think if it's under the fund, it doesn't matter because we went up to 2.8 for last year. That didn't impact anything like we had to amend the budget or anything because it's still in the fund, correct?
That's correct in terms of a budget amendment.
Right.
And I can answer your other question to the best of my ability. I may defer a little bit to Brad on prior year expenses. But I do know in terms of purchasing some of the devices prior to June 30th, that decision was made, and what that did is get us on a better timeline cycle. If we needed to wait until July, I can tell you, I believe they were ordered in April, and we're still coming in August and September, and there are notable delays, right? So what that allows us to do now is by spending those dollars in FY21, we can now take the same budgeted dollars that we would have spent, and we now have a much more flexible timeline where in December and January we can order devices for the following school year and we're 6 months ahead timeline-wise for receiving them and implementing. And then in terms of the $800,000, I will also say that we have made some budget splits where we split apart some of the technology budget. I don't know if that's what you're referring to, Mr. Lucetti, or?
I don't know, the note just says, move student computers to ESSER grant, and you moved $821,000 out of line 61 under Fund 10.
We did create a 62, a subject area 62 for instructional technology. Oh, sure, sorry, I thought you were pointing out there. So, Mr. Kaufman, in terms of the 800, do you want to speak to that split and that move for ESSER?
Thank you. You know, we're tag teaming on this here. So, two things happening here. First, we did make a split out in the department budgets. We set up a new department, Department 62 for instructional curriculum versus system curriculum. But as far as the computers, so we were able, when FY21, we were able to make that budget transfer. And basically, we're able to shift our computers expenditures back 1 year, which allows us to not be on such a tight timeline. So what initial plan was in FY22, we were going to have to be purchasing computers and putting them right directly into service, pushing to get them done during the summer. By being able to bring the purchases that we're going to put into service this fall into FY21, that's going to allow us for our FY22 to get out in the market early, get hopefully better pricing on our computers, get them in time, get them ready, and then get them into service in the fall for 23. As far as the budget goes, we have ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 playing a role here. So for ESSER 2, we're going to use those to purchase computers for next fall. ESSER 3 is going to be used as Dr. Fury outlined, and is going to be ran over 3 years. So to bring this into adjustment, we needed to make some adjustment on the budget. So as far as that $816,000, that's the money we're going to be using for learning loss, and then also we're moving funds that had been previously budgeted under technology, we're moving them over to ESSER 2. So in a sense, freeing up more money that then flows to our 3% surplus. So does that answer the question?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Any other comments or questions for either the two? Well, the one CSBO and the one former CSBO. But all right. Well, hearing none, we'll move ahead on the agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if you just want to maybe hang out, I think we'll have some things coming up for you in a few minutes.
Sure.
We'll move on to the consent agenda. We have the approval of the regular meeting minutes of June 17th, 2021, approval of the closed meeting minutes of June 17th, 2021 meeting, approval of the payrolls of June 18th, 2021, July 2nd, 2021, July 20th, 2021, and August 5th, 2021. Out-of-state travel, approval of the 2021-2022 hazardous busing recertification organizational chart for the 2021-2022 school year. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda items?
So move.
Do I have a second? All right, Linda, can you call the vote?
I'm going to call the vote.
That's fine.
Okay. Mr. Janik?
Aye.
Ms. Janice Doyle?
Aye.
Mr. Kirking?
Aye.
Mr. Lassie, oh, sorry. Mr. Lucetti?
Aye.
Mrs. Stokes?
Aye.
The motion passes.
All right, moving ahead to the action items, we have the presentation of invoices for June 18th, 2021 through August 12th, 2021.
Motion to approve the invoices in the amount of $6,482,382.14 dated August 12th, 2021.
Do I have a second? Any questions? All right, hearing none. Linda, can you open the vote?
Unfortunately, I'm not able to. I'm going to just call the votes. So, Mr. Janik.
Aye.
Ms. Janice Doyle. Mr. Kirking.
Aye.
Mr. Lucetti.
Aye.
Mrs. Stokes.
Aye.
The motion passes.
All right, next up, we have the treasurer's report for June 2021.
Perfect, thank you. Mr. Kaufman and I have tag teamed this work. We are going to have Mr. Kaufman present because it is from June 2021, and so since it was for fiscal year 21, Brad will walk through those. We can both take any questions.
Thank you. For June 30th ending, the district recognized 41.9 million in revenue, or almost 38% of our revenue. So you can see why it's a little difficult projecting things, when in the last month of our fiscal year, we had 38% of our total revenues collected. We expended just over 10 million, leaving an ending cash balance of 39.8 million. As far as the cash flow for the month, we had anticipated that the 90-day delay in tax levy was going to create quite a havoc with our tax levy. And actually, we had more of a normal tax collection for June, collecting 15.9 million more than we had anticipated. But we did have some of those last-minute expenditures. We've talked about earlier, the computers, firewall, email, servers, etc. So those actually were a little higher than we expected, but overall, we had a $13.9 million positive cash flow for that month, or for the month of June. When you look at it, overall, year-to-date, for June 30th, we are 12 million better off than in the prior years as the district continues to strengthen our financial position, and the Will County 90-day tax delay was not as much as we had anticipated. Also, part of the treasurer's report is the budget variance report. This is just an annual report we only do at the end of the fiscal year, but I would just like to walk through that quickly with the board. As far as the budget variance goes, overall for all funds, the district was short $7.73 million worth of revenue. 53% of that shortage was related to the tax levy, or $5.3 million. The district was also short $319,000 in investment income, as investment rates have pretty much dropped off of the charts. The district also was short $866,000 for student admissions and fees. These include $80,000 of summer school, $324,000 in athletics. AP exams were down $111,000 from budget. Summer camps, $247,000, and finally, PE and other class fees were down $100,000. Other local revenue was also down by $473,000. It was made up of building rentals of $277,000, booster donations of $171,000, driver's ed fees of $79,000, and impact fees were actually up than over budget by a positive $56,000. As far as state revenue goes, we were $209,000 short. That was made up of a DECO grant that the district had been awarded. We still have been awarded that grant, but the problem has just not been funded. So that will possibly be a 23 item. We're not sure when they're going to fund that. But that was $325,000. State driver's ed fee was down by $48,000, but special education tuition We did get another extra payment, so that's up by $130,000 from budget. As far as federal goes, we were $1 million more than we had anticipated. That was special ed IDEA of $520,000, the ESSER/CARE money of $584,000, and then finally Title II was down by $69,000. Overall, revenue without transfers was short $9.9 million. However, with the health insurance transfer, which was more than we had expected, we were at the $7.7 million of shortage. As far as expenditures go, the district overall, we were short on expenditures or under budget by $7.1 million. Of course, the largest portion of that was salaries, 40% salaries and benefits. This was due to reduced overtime, extra hours, coaching activity stipends, transportation. We were down substantially there due to less drivers, food service workers, and paraprofessionals. Finally, 33% of our shortage was to do with supplies. That's made up of $1.2 million in food service items that weren't needed. Diesel, fuel, and gas was down $562,000. General supplies down $263,000. Natural gas $208,000, and electricity $133,000. Special ed private tuition was down $691,000 under budget, and non-capital purchases were $319,000 under budget. What's amazing when you look at this overall, we were under budget by the $7 million or $8.7 million for operating, and yet we were almost only 600-some thousand off from our budgeted surplus. So that was amazing because we were under on revenue, but we're also under on expenditures. With that, I would just answer any questions people would have on the cash flow, treasurer's report, or the budget variance report.
So Brad, when you, the revenue that we were under, that part of that was because of how the taxes were,
Yes,
and we still made it, and we, wow, because there's 4 payments now, okay.
Yes, and if you remember back in April and May, I was really worried we could actually have a deficit because I thought we were going to be that short on tax revenue. So it's become an amazing journey this last month. June was a very exciting accounting month.
And you got those payments pretty quickly too, right?
Yes.
Okay.
What is TORT?
Tort immunity is Fund 80. Within that fund, we provide for our unemployment, workers' compensation, and general liability insurance.
Any other questions for Brad? All right, hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the treasurer's report? All right, Linda, can you open the vote or do you need to call it again?
The vote is open. The vote is unanimous. The motion passes.
Thank you, Brad. I think that's the first time I've heard accounting described as exciting. All right, moving on, we have student activities report for June 2021 and July 2021.
The student activities report for both months are in your backup materials. The only negative balance for each was Lincoln Way Central cheerleading. They had to order their uniforms prior to their season, and everything will be covered then in this month, and by the end of August, everything will be in the positive. So I'd ask for approval of the 2 activity reports as presented.
Do I have a motion to approve the student activities report for June and July 2021 as presented?
Second.
All right, any questions? All right, hearing none, Linda, can you open the vote, please?
The vote is open. The vote is unanimous. The motion passes.
All right, moving along, we have the personnel report, employment, Mr. Schiffbauer.
Good evening. I would refer the board to the employment report in your backup materials, and I would ask the board to approve the employment report as presented.
All right, do I have a motion to approve the employment report as presented? All right, Linda, can you open the vote? Or, I'm sorry, are there any questions for Mr. Schiffbauer? Oh, okay, hearing none. Linda, can you open? Oh, sorry.
How are we doing on bus drivers?
Well, Mr. Leone and his team are doing everything we can to try to get as many folks in as possible. We'll get the kids to school.
So we have made some adjustments. Manhattan has gone to a 3-tier busing instead of 2, so that basically saves a third right there. And then we're looking to combine some routes at the high school level of the 0-hour, first-hour nature. But the one positive, when we start next week and New Lenox starts next week, some of the other feeders start the following week. So we do have a week to work out some of those kinks, but it's tight. We think we're going to make it very tight, and we look forward to the unemployment benefits expiring, and hopefully we'll be able to get some more individuals into work. But that's a very good question. We're tight, District 843, and I know the surrounding areas are as well. It's a very fair question. But right now, it looks like we'll make it.
Any other questions? All right, I believe the vote is open.
The vote is open. The vote is unanimous. The motion passes.
All right, next up, we have the personnel report, resignation, leaves, and other.
All right, under resignations, we have Peter Cashman, bus driver, David Coda, bus driver, Jessica Fox, food service, Jacqueline Gordon, paraprofessional, Jennifer Hannon, director of community relations, Debbie Jordan, bus driver, Molly Kapelensky, paraprofessional, Michelle Miner, bus driver, Kelly Rocks, social worker, Shannon Santiago, paraprofessional, Zachary Sasser, bus driver, Dan Zableski, assistant boys tennis coach, Sharon Tolliver, bus driver, and Jason Visney, part-time dean. I ask the board to approve the resignations as presented.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
All right, any questions? All right, hearing none. Linda, can you open the vote, please?
The vote is open. The vote is unanimous. The motion passes.
All right, next up is the personnel report, retirements.
Under retirements, we have Derek Martin and Linnell Sheeler, both requesting to retire August 1st, 2024. I ask the board to approve the retirements as presented.
Do I have a motion? Any questions? Hearing none. Linda, can you please open the vote?
The vote is open. The vote is unanimous. The motion passes.
All right, next up, we have the e-learning in lieu of emergency days resolution.
I would first ask that we get a motion and second, and then we can discuss. So I'd ask the board to approve a resolution to adopt e-learning program in lieu of the district's scheduled emergency days. So it would permit student instruction to be received electronically while students are not physically present in lieu of the district's scheduled emergency days. I ask that the board approve the resolution as presented.
Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
hear a second?
Second.
All right, any questions?
I actually just have a question first, and then I'll make a couple comments on why I would support this. My question is, my understanding of once we adopt this, this can be used not just for inclement weather, it can also be used for typical low attendance days. It can also be used for national testing days, in that when the juniors are testing, instead of giving the other 3 grades the day off, they could have an e-learning day and it would count as a day for them. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
if we wanted to use it in that fashion, we certainly could. The issue for us will be number of teachers and proctors, but yes, that's something we will explore.
Okay. I would say that this is something that we should absolutely do for a couple of reasons. One, I've been teaching high school for 20 years. When you add days to the end of the year, those are typically not instructional days. When you have an AP curriculum, they're very tight, especially second semester when a snow day would typically be used in January, February. And by having an e-learning day, it provides continuity for the curriculum, whereas if you, like, they're not gonna move the AP tests back a day if we take a snow day. So the opportunity for AP, teachers to miss a day, if they could have an e-learning and have contact with the kids, and have the students continue to work on their curriculum, as opposed to pushing it into May or June, I think that, it helps a lot of the teachers at the end. The other thing is, families. A lot of times families, I think we always have to take into consideration, a lot of them plan vacations, things like that. And if we have graduation set up, we're not gonna move graduation because of snow days. And, I mean, how many times have we even used snow days in the last decade? I know, sorry. Yes, so that would be my.
So this would be a schedule, and they would be participating online in some way, shape, or form with the teacher.
Yes, it'd be synchronous. Yes.
Synchronous, yeah. And why would we be approving this for 3 years?
That's the way the Illinois State Board of Education has set it up in a 3-year cycle. So similar to other waivers, you would do it for 3 years and then just reapply. If we did it this year and it's something that we didn't feel was necessary to do again, it's something that we could certainly discuss at the end of this year and possibly not do next year. But once approved, it would apply for 3 years.
How will the students be told, will there be any practice or anything, or does this just happen one day in January and then they're kind of good luck finding it?
That's a great question. So last year would be the practice for the sophomores, juniors, and seniors, but obviously we will be prepared for this, and this is something that teachers will take the students through the steps prior to the winter years to say, if inclement weather, here's how you get into teams. That's the one good thing about Microsoft and the way we've been utilizing our programming is all the students are very comfortable in getting into teams and getting on to WebEx. So I think we'll be okay there, but we will have to, it's a good point, we will have to go through WebEx with our incoming freshmen because not every feeder used WebEx last year as a platform.
I would encourage just make sure everybody understands the program so that if there's a day in January, February, we don't find out the next day that nobody knew what they were doing.
No, that's a good point.
And then what about any potential financial impact? This is just so that we stay on schedule, as Beth indicated, with, those types of things, or anything else?
No, it's primarily scheduling, to be completely honest. It's primarily scheduling. Different districts have utilized this different ways. There are districts that put together, like pre-packets ahead of time, and if you have a snow day, here's your packet. That's not what we're looking to do. We're looking to stay on the sequence of teaching.
So that answers my final question, that there are other districts locally or others that have adopted this?
Correct.
Scott, quick question. So if we were to do this, so most of the times, I guess, when the teachers were teaching for remote learning, a lot of them were coming into the building. So a teacher would do this at home, or some of the teachers were at home as well?
Correct. And most likely, they'll stay at home if it's a snow, ice emergency.
Okay.
If it's a cold day, I wouldn't be surprised to see most of the teachers come into the classroom just as they did last summer. You know, our purpose of cancellation on snow days primarily is the bus stops.
Right.
But if it's ice or snow, we'll encourage teachers to do it from home.
Okay. I guess, I think this is feasible because we're having the technology that we're handing out. Because of the technology and everybody is, you know, if we did not have the technology that we were actually giving out laptops or including laptops with enrollment, I think it could be a challenge because I know even with remote learning, some families were having issues with not having enough devices at home. So if we know for certain that everyone that people have dedicated devices, then of course it works. So my only hesitation is if there's a lack of access of devices at a home, if everybody is home on a snow day, meaning all ages. So that's my only concern. And I know we're rolling this plan out or this phase out.
Yeah.
So the first part of it is like the freshmen, they're going to receive their
Freshmen
laptops.
and sophomores have them.
So freshmen and sophomores have it. So then it's our juniors and our seniors. And so that's where I'm kind of on the fence because when there's a snow day, everybody in the household is home.
Gonna need a device.
It needs a device. And so I don't know, I can support this, but at the same time, I think it might be a little early for us until we can make sure that everybody has a dedicated device if there is truly a shutdown and everybody, meaning workers, because a lot of people are working from home now.
Sure.
So the household's computer is now in use, you know, by, you know, the parents. So that's just my concern.
I think that's a valid concern and something we'll continue to work through. Because I do know last year there were families with multiple children in the home.
Any other questions or comments? All right, Linda, can you open the vote, please?
The vote is open. The vote is 4-1, 4 ayes and 1 abstain from Mrs. Stokes. The motion passes.
All right, moving on, we have the District 843 fiscal year 2022 budget.
Included in your backup materials is a comparison of the last year and then the final budget with highlights. This has been incorporated into our budget as well. So both Brad and Mike have gone through that. It's interesting how quick Brad got out of that seat when he got the chance. So the budget is included for your review. If there are any questions or if Deidre would have anything to include, I know all of the member districts are approving this budget this month so that their board can approve it in September.
I have nothing to add. I believe Sarah has done a great job with everything, and I believe we scrutinized the budget quite well.
And we're not approving anything tonight, this is just information, correct?
This would be an approval.
Oh, okay,
This would be an
I didn't see the
approval.
motion there.
Yeah, the individual districts would have to approve the 843 budget
So that we would then,
as presented, and then
843
843 would have to approve it
Got it.
for it to become formal.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, do I have a motion to approve the 843 budget as presented? Do I have a second? All right.
Second?
Any questions? All right, hearing none, can you please call the vote?
The vote is open. The vote is unanimous. The motion passes.
All right, next up, we have the intergovernmental agreement between Lincoln Way Area Special Education District 843 and Lincoln Way Community High School District 210 for use of the McKay Education Center.
So this is an addendum to our original agreement. Last year, we utilized the McKay Center to provide our own service, to provide our own student services. Something we're going to do again for the upcoming year. Sarah and I had talked and thought we needed to revise and just make sure that we had some of the language ironed out. For instance, any capital improvements, any major repairs goes through 843. That's not a Lincoln Way expense. So this is just an addendum to what we'd already agreed to. You know, we own basically 40% of that building, that property, is the way that the co-op is split. And utilizing it last year, we're running a very successful program there, and it went really well, and we're hoping to do that again and continue to build upon that. So this would just be an addendum to the original contract. I can answer any questions. I know that this has already been brought, I think, the first draft to 843 prior to this meeting.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the intergovernmental agreement between Lincoln Way Area Special Education District 843 and Lincoln Way Community High School District 210 for use of the McKay Education Center as presented?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Second. All right, any questions? All right, hearing none, Linda, can you call the vote?
The vote is open. The vote is unanimous. The motion passes.
All right, next up, we have the interfund loan resolution.
Yes, so.
Nope, there you go.
There you go, now it is. Thank you. So we have an interfund loan resolution presented here. And if you go back and take a look at the cash flow report through July 31st that was attached as part of the 22 tentative budget presentation, you can see that we have a $2.3 million interfund loan scheduled here, and that is because we believe this will allow us to avoid any need for tax anticipation warrants this year. We don't necessarily need the money yet, but we are doing it because we think that we will need it in the spring in the education fund. Now, you also see in that cash flow report that in the spring, we did leave kind of a reevaluation period of time. Last spring, there was a later interfund loan done, and again, all interfund loans repaid before the close of the fiscal year to their appropriate fund. We don't have anything else scheduled at this time. If, again, revenues and/or expenses go kind of differently than anticipated as they did during fiscal year 21, we've left a period of time in March to kind of reassess. May is when we should be the tightest. And so if we feel like we need one at that time, it would most likely be from the O&M fund to education, and then again repaid by the end of the year. But at this time, it's only the $2.3 million, and that's the resolution before you tonight.
All right, do I have a motion to approve the interfund loan resolution?
So moved.
Do I have a second? All right, any questions? No? All right, hearing none. Linda, can you open the vote?
The vote is open. The vote is unanimous. The motion passes.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we have the ISDLAF resolution.
Yeah, so the ISDLAF fund is, we partner with PMA and ISDLAF just to handle investments. We've participated in this fund before, and this resolution is nothing more of a continuation. We did need to update, obviously, my name, and that is to make investments as the treasurer on behalf of the district. So this is required by them to participate in the fund.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the ISDLAF resolution as presented? Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, any questions? All right, hearing none, can you please open the vote?
The vote is open. Ms. Janice Doyle? The vote is unanimous. The motion passes.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we have the establishment of the fiscal year 2022 budget hearing date.
This would be on the 16th of September at the board meeting, and so we'd open the regular meeting and then have that hearing. As I said earlier, we do need to publish notice, as you know, so that would go into the Joliet Herald News tomorrow on the 13th, and the budget will be publicly available for inspection.
All right, do I have a motion to approve the FY 2022 budget hearing as presented? All right, any questions? Hearing none, Linda, can you please open the vote?
The vote is open. The vote is unanimous. The motion passes.
All right, last item under action items is the Independent Inspector General.
Yes, included in the back of materials would be an extension agreement with Sickich as our independent inspector general. Just terms and services as has been the case. If we ever run up to, I believe it was $5,000 was the limit. The board president, yes, if any month we get to $5,000 for any investigation, the board president will be notified. This last year, there were not any complaints fielded by Sickich, but I would recommend that we continue our agreement for another year.
All right, do I have a motion to approve the Independent Inspector General for 2021-2022 as presented? All right, any questions?
I did have a question. Where is this information posted for people to access?
On our website? Okay, so right now it's down in the board tab. We're going to have to get it up to a better spot because it's not on the front page like it was prior. Yeah. It's transparency probably. Let's see.
Any further questions or comments? No. Linda, can you please open the vote?
The vote is open.
Yeah, it's under Board of Education, under FOIA requests.
The vote is unanimous. The motion passes.
We can get that changed pretty quickly, probably. Move the tab up. All right, so moving on to informational items. We have the report of the Lincoln Way Special Education District 843 Governing Board meetings held June 22nd, 2021 and July 27th, 2021.
I have nothing to add other than there's just been some administration changes, but there's been some good hires and some people there that I think is, going to move things ahead. And of course, they have their challenge with bus drivers, so hopefully they can work that out.
All right, next up, we have the safe return to in-person instruction.
The 2021-22 Safe Return to In-Person Instruction is in your backup materials. Obviously, there's been quite a bit of discussion behind the scenes, and quite a bit has changed over the last several weeks as we worked our way through preparing for the start of the school year. But what is included is the administration's recommendation to begin the school year. It was not an action item this evening. It's not necessarily discretionary at this time, and we hope to provide opportunities both academically and extracurricular to our students as we move through the beginning of the school year. We anticipate an update to the governor's mandate by October 4th. So that would have put it 4 or 8 weeks from the date of his announcement. And I know several districts have voted to go mask optional. I know several of those districts held meetings this week to rescind that vote. I also know what the Illinois State Board of Education is threatening. I know what they're planning on doing. I know high schools that are not participating in fall sports this week. As a parent, I completely understand all perspectives, and I understand. Our administration would recommend that we do what we can as we work through this. You need to know that when I talk to the Will County Health Department, when I talk to the Illinois State Board of Education, I advocate for our district to make their decisions. I have since the beginning of this. That's why in the plan that I submitted, it didn't have Will County as the gauge of where we would be. It had our zip codes. Currently, our zip codes, our infectious rate and our spread is lower than the remainder of Will County. But we are where we are right now. When I compare where we were last year, it's not even close. Last year, we weren't practicing football. Our marching bands weren't in parades and getting ready to compete. So I understand. I completely understand. But at this time, it would be our recommendation we continue to work through. We'll have another opportunity in September while we are still within the mask mandate to revisit, discuss what next steps may be. But I'd be happy to answer any questions or provide perspective if the board members have any questions or thoughts.
I'll start. I thought the plan that we had prior to August 4th was a good plan. It made recommendations, but it didn't require until the governor took that away. And then he brought in the ISBE to state that if you don't do as I say, these are your consequences, and they're punitive. What really disappoints me is that we have, this is personal opinion, not opinion of the board, a so-called leader in Springfield that doesn't believe we can be adult enough to make our own decisions. Unfortunately, he uses this pulpit, we'll leave out the adjective at this time, to take that away from us. And what I would ask, just as one member of the board, ask administration, and I will also make this call, and he actually knows I've already made it, to our leadership of the board, to find other districts that maybe feel, not necessarily whether they should be masked or unmasked, but that decision should be a local decision. And to have some conversation with those districts that if we need to aggregate or collaborate in our voice outside of the superintendents, that we need to do that. And I understand, I'm not making a decision, I'm not politicizing it, whether it's a mask or unmasked thing. The thing that I find most disappointing is that a plan was created, it was put into place, and then we weren't even given the option. And that's what needs to be really spelled out. So I would ask that, and again, I've already made that aware of the person who normally is president of the board.
Not to me,
I know,
too.
right? I know. That's Aaron looking at me like, please don't make me do this.
I'll do it.
That we would want to maybe reach out to districts that are just looking to make sure that the person in Springfield that made this decision to not give us a decision needs to know that we're not happy with that decision.
Yeah, I tend to agree with a lot of what you said. I think looking at, as we get into the next few weeks, you know, the potential for students to potentially lose out on participating in extracurricular activities, especially after last year where they didn't have any. And some of those students that have been, you know, this is, you know, their last year, you know, they missed junior year, and if we were to have them pull it out senior year, and you know, frankly, a lot of the students that go to our schools get scholarships. You know, they use their time here at Lincoln Way to showcase, you know, what they can do to, you know, colleges and universities for sports and band and art. And if we're not allowed to participate in those things, and it's, you know, our hands are kind of tied behind our back on those, it'd be real difficult for me to as much as I'd probably like to take the stand, to do it. And pull that out from, you know, the rug out from underneath students. So I share in the frustration, but you know, we're in a difficult spot here, and it's.
Let's be clear, there's a lot of guidelines and mandates that the ISBE has out there that in my, nearly 6+ years on the board, that we don't agree with. But we have to abide by them in an effort to continue to get not only just the funding, but the other ancillary benefits of being part of a public education system in the state of Illinois. This, unfortunately, right now is the one that's staring us right in the face. And again, it's the whole idea that we didn't get to decide. That is kind of the thing that's grinding my gears. So it's not, you know, it's not the ISBE in general, and I agree with you wholeheartedly that the senior year or any year that you're making memories. I don't care if it's for a scholarship or whatever, you're gonna tell stories, it's gonna come back over and over again, whether it's sports, band, athletes, I don't care what it is. It's just the fact that we didn't get to make that decision. And for all the state capitals in our fine 50 states to try and dictate to somebody else to tell them what to do, it's the people in Springfield, that's even more ridiculous. Here endeth my comments.
Any other comments?
So we have this safe return to in-person learning plan. Does the rest of it just get implemented? I mean, the clean, you know.
Correct. Everything else is going on, and tomorrow we're going to send out, we could have done a better job explaining the test to stay, so we're going to send out an addendum tomorrow on the test to stay. And the reason we're not utilizing, you know, I can't think of the name of it, but there's the test that every kids are taking.
Shield test?
The shield test, we're not utilizing that. What we're utilizing is if two students are masked in class and one tests positive, the close contacts, if they are non-vaccinated, may take a test on day 1, 3, 5, and 7 and stay. Our nurses can do that for them. I went to Joliet and I picked up the test today. If parents want to take them to urgent care or their doctor to get a test and bring back the negative test, they can stay. And so we need to do a little bit better job explaining that. The rest of it, Chris, we amended to say, while we're in the governor's order 85, we're going to wear a mask, we're still utilizing all these other mitigations. The more mitigations you have, the more likely we are able to get to a place when the numbers dictate and the governor allows to go maskless. You know, we would monitor our quarantines by building just like we did last year, our positive cases just like we did like last year. We will continue to do that. In fact, we will monitor our close contacts and whether or not they test positive or not. That's one of the advantages of us having a testing system is now, let's say one student creates 5 close contacts, we have data on those 5 students from days 1 through 7 to determine if they ever transmit the disease. And if they are negative all the way through, then we can come back and say, listen, here it was, and there wasn't transmission. We kept data over the summer of our camps, and you know, we did band and football, and we did so relatively successfully, and so, you know, we'll continue to monitor this, but the rest of the plan is in place, correct, to answer your question.
And speaking to the tracking of the quarantines and whatnot, I know on our prior website, we had like a tracker, if you will.
Yeah, we'll be
Get that back
tracking.
up and-
Yeah, we're not there yet, but we'll have it all ready to go and certainly continue to monitor. As the board knows, I have weekly meetings with the Will County Health Department. I have weekly meetings with superintendents from Cairo, Illinois to Lake Zurich. And many of us are in the same place, and that let's continue to look at the numbers and track the numbers. And that's why I do feel our plan utilizing our zip codes made the most sense. But we'll continue to work through this, and we're at a better place than we were last year as we work through this. I think that's the thing we got to look at. And we have all of our kids in the building, which, hey, our test scores are not where we want them. I'll be the first one to say that. The previous year, taking 3 months and learning via packet wasn't successful in math and English. We know that. Going every other day is not the best option either. So I'm excited that they'll be in every day, and we'll work through this.
All right, next up, we have FOIA requests.
Just one FOIA, and it's in your backup materials for your review.
Our buildings and ground report.
Once again included, Mr. Wilkie could answer any questions that you might have, all in the backup materials.
Community relations report.
This will be the last pride sheet by Jen Hannon. We wish her well in her future endeavors. She'll be leaving us and moving on, but we thank Jen for her service to the district and wish her well.
Thank you very much, Jen. Appreciate it. Asset of the month.
Asset of the month for August is self-awareness, school engagement, and kids are actively engaged in learning. At home, talk with your children about school and learning at school. Conduct internet surveys at the start of the year to find out what your students are interested in. That's something we'll be doing this year. And then in the community, ask me to talk with how they're doing in school. Encourage them to do well. Talk positively about your own school experiences.
All right, the quarterly health insurance report.
Well, quarterly health insurance is included in your backup material for your review. If Mike wants to speak to a couple of the items, we can. We'll have more information as we work through to prepare our costing for the upcoming year. We had a large meeting on Tuesday of this week. My days are running together. Was that right, Mike? Tuesday, this meeting. We'll have another meeting next week to begin setting rates for the upcoming year. But if anybody has any particular questions, Mike or myself can answer them. Otherwise, it's in there for the review. That's something we said we would do quarterly as we moved over to our self-funded plan.
First reading for policies.
Several policies, superintendent notes are in there. If there are any questions prior to action next month, please get those to me, and we'll be bringing some policies back for approval in September.
All right, we have the legislative report.
Included in the legislative report, the message we received from ISB just here in the last 48 hours that, basically said, here's what they're possibly going to do. Details Executive Order 21-18. I thought that was pertinent to include at this time.
Superintendent's district report.
Nothing additional to report at this time other than we're excited to get started next week.
Other district business.
Board President would need to assign 2 members to review the closed session minutes from January 1 through May 31st, and since you're the acting president, you get to pick.
Well, I think I know who I will assign.
Yes, that's right.
The 2 board members who were unable to join us this evening will be reviewing the board minutes. It'll be President Kostick and Mr. Lacine.
I kind of thought that's the way that would go.
It's generally how it goes. When you don't show up, you get volunteered.
Although, also in the other district business, as you know, we opened bids to the land at 191st and Harlem. We're still working out some of the particulars of that contract, so I will be bringing something back in September for the board. I'll continue to speak with President Kostick as we work through the process, but we've met with 2 of the developers and the Village of Tinley Park. Tinley Park has met with them twice, and so now we're working towards a contract, and I'll have something more for the board in September.
All right, correspondence?
Nothing additional at this time.
There's no closed session tonight?
Correct.
So with that, I would make a motion to, or we need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved. Second.
All right, all in favor, signify by saying aye. All right, our next meeting is September 16th, 2021.
Correct, thank you.